Hello, friend. This is To Live the Truth, the podcast. My name is Ryan Clawson. In this show, we sit down to dive a little deeper into the concepts in my book, To Live the Truth, which you can read for free at ryantclawson.com/tolivethetruth. In each episode, we address one chapter in a sort of book club format. This week, my beautiful wife Allie and I talk about Chapter 7, Experiment Upon My Words.
We've talked about discovering truth and how important it is to search out and find this truth and apply it to our lives. When we do that, our actions and behaviors will be more effective and we'll have more peace, happiness, and success in our lives. And so one way that we search out truth is from living media, especially living books that are filled with ideas. And an important part of this process is our faith. And so last chapter, we went over the faith cycle, and that's where you receive some kind of evidence or witness. And faith includes belief and action. You actually have to act on it. And if that happens and it's a correct truth, then you receive more evidence. And it's this spiral up.
Okay, so now this week we're talking about Chapter 7, which is titled Experiment Upon My Words. And this chapter centers around Chapter 32 of the Book of Alma in the Book of Mormon. Let's read the summary page real quick. To test an idea to see if it is true, we must exercise a particle of faith, or even just the desire to believe, by acting as if the idea were true. If, after beginning to do so, new signs appear, the first of which may be an enlarging and enlightening of your mind and heart, this is likely an indication that the seed is good, and therefore worthy of increased belief and action. Be wary of the three instances that may interrupt the faith cycle, which are 1. Skepticism, a refusal to believe in the signs and witnesses already available. 2. Falsehood, the simple fact that the idea you've been testing is not true or real. And 3. Neglect, a failure to continue nourishing the word, either by being scorched by the honeymoon phase or choked by the cares and lusts of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. So like I said, this chapter centers around Alma's allegory of the seed, where he compares the word, and the word means an idea or a truth claim. He compares that to a seed being planted in our hearts. And I mean, really, the entire concept of my book is centered around this allegory. But he says, first of all, that when you encounter a truth claim, the invitation is to believe that truth claim. Or if you can't believe, at least the desire to believe is enough. And he says to arouse your faculties even to an experiment upon the word. So basically begin to live as if that word were true, right? And the first signs that appear after beginning to exercise faith on a new principle may be the feelings he describes of, it beginneth to enlarge my soul, it beginneth to enlighten my understanding, it beginneth to be delicious to me. And I provide a few questions to help evaluate whether these initial signs of the seed being good are present. So questions like, does this word align with other bits of truth I've learned? How or how not? I put that how or how not because you may be tempted to reject a truth claim because it doesn't align with certain beliefs you already hold, which may be an indicator that it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not necessarily the case. It may be a good opportunity for you to question some of the beliefs that you've been holding for a long time. If this new truth claim seems potentially good and viable, but it contradicts some beliefs you're currently holding, there may be some adjustment that needs to be made there. And it may end in rejecting that word, but it's worth considering.
Right.
Another question is, What changes, if any, have I seen in my life as a result of beginning to live by this word? So if you've adopted this idea or truth claim into your life and begun to live as if it's true, it's important to observe what changes have you seen as a result. What fruit have already come from this adjustment in your lifestyle? Has trying the experiment expanded or enlightened my understanding, either of this specific word or of truth generally? Remember that all truth is connected. Learning any one truth often increases and enhances one's understanding of others. I've definitely seen that to be true in many cases. That's why I love the image of the tree, because every individual leaf on a tree is still part of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
It's not separate from it. And so on the surface, every little individual, seemingly trivial fact or observation you can make in the world is not just this free-floating, completely isolated thing. It is connected to all other things in existence. And so it's useful to look at it that way, that if this word you're experimenting on truly is aligned with truth, is a component of truth, then it may very well influence your understanding of truth generally. It may have a little trickle effect into other aspects of your understanding of truth that you didn't expect. The last question, how has experimenting upon the word made me feel? Has it become delicious to me? Has exercising faith in this idea invited what the Apostle Paul called fruit of the Spirit, such as love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance? So those questions can help you evaluate what the initial results may be of the experiment. And if you can answer those questions favorably, then likely you have encountered a good principle, a good seed, right? If not, then here I introduce an interrupter of the faith cycle, which is basically an interruption between action and evidence. And it's probably the most obvious one. I call it falsehood, which is basically if the truth claim was in fact not good, not true, then believing and acting on that belief in that principle should not produce any results. However, I do give the warning of not setting too high a standard for the initial signs or witnesses that this word is good. It really may just be a simple swelling in your breast, the feeling of enlarging and comprehension.
I just think it's interesting that we've studied those chapters our whole life, reading the Book of Mormon, and we've always applied it to the gospel. And I think it was just a couple of years ago that you read that and you were like, I think that this actually can be used for all truth, just anything we encounter. I mean, you wrote a whole book on it, and it really is useful. And it's a good tool to not only use for the gospel, but just anything you learn, anything you read, just apply it, have a desire to believe, start using it and acting on it. And like you said, if you see good results from it, or even just feel better, feel like a more complete person, feel happier, then these are all good signs.
One thing I wanted to kind of point out about this chapter, I think it's interesting that Alma almost never uses the word true. He mostly talks about it, the word being good. And then he even says, and is not this real? Why doesn't he say, isn't this true? Well, I think if I were to go back through this chapter, which I probably will, I'm going to be a little more careful about using the word true in this chapter, because it can be misleading here. Because the experiment upon the word is not to determine right out of the gate whether a word or an idea or a truth claim is true or false. I would hesitate to label something false, 100% false,
Right.
if it doesn't produce results. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to align a little better with absolute truth. That's what we're trying to do. And a truth claim, an idea, a word, whatever, may be a step in the right direction for you, while it may be a step in the wrong direction for somebody else. And so you experimenting upon the word may invite these signs into your life because for you, it's a step closer to alignment. But for somebody else with a totally different lifestyle, looking totally different from yours, they may be introduced to that same idea and exercise the same experiment and not get that result because it would be a step away. It would be a step in the wrong direction, a step away from alignment, right? Just like if going back to the example in the last chapter about the directions to the library, if the stranger that gives you the directions to walk half a mile and then turn right, those are not the kind of directions you would give somebody who's a mile down that road. They would need the opposite. They would need to walk half a mile and then walk left. So like based on where you are in relation to absolute truth, you would need to take different steps, right? That's what we're trying to do here. And that's why I think that's a big reason why Alma doesn't use the word true. He's talking about reality. He's talking about goodness, surety. And now he is specifically talking about Christ. Christ is who he's referring to. And again, we'll talk about this more in chapter 9 about how I believe that Christ is the trunk of the tree. He is the center. So any step towards Christ is a good step.
Right.
But in all the nitty gritty little aspects of truth, that journey is going to look different for everybody, you know? But I would definitely invite anybody who's reading or listening to be open-minded and recognize that this is an ongoing journey, not a destination. I believe God has designed truth to lead you. As long as you're willing to be led, you will be led in the way that works for you. And that may require you to encounter some half-truths here and there that are deliberately placed in your path to divert your path just a little bit, just enough to get you moving a little bit more in the right direction.
Yeah.
I just want to briefly review the two interrupters that may appear at the beginning of the experiment. And the first one is skepticism, the refusal to believe in the truth claim that's presented to you, just rejecting it right out of the gate. The other interrupter that occurs at the beginning is falsehood. If that truth claim is not a good seed, if it's not a true principle, then evidence will not follow action.
Okay. When I was reading this, I was a little confused because this third one, neglect, that you're probably going to get to, like the other two didn't seem at the beginning. Like obviously on this cycle, I'm like, neglect is earlier than falsehood. But if you look at it as the spiral going up,
yes,
then the neglect part could actually happen anywhere on the spiral, even at the very top. But the falsehood would be on that first ring around.
Generally.
Yeah.
But just like we were talking about, the idea here is to not necessarily discover a pure truth right out of the gate.
Right.
And so you may find that a belief that used to bring fruit in the past one day ceases to do so, ceases to be useful. And that's not a reason to just throw it out altogether, but it may be an indicator that it's time for refinement, that it has outlived its utility because perhaps you've worked on that weaker sector of your tree to the point where it now is much more sculpted than it used to be, and it needs a little bit more fine touch. So it's not necessarily a guarantee that falsehood and skepticism occur at the beginning, but they typically do.
Yeah.
Right? That's where they're going to be most frequently encountered, right? But yes, the third interrupter is neglect, which typically occurs later on. So neglect is the break between belief and action. And to give us a little more insight into that, I invoke Jesus's parable of the sower. Jesus talks about the seed that fell on stony ground where it had not much earth, and it immediately sprang up. And because it had no depth of earth, when the sun was up, it was scorched. That's what it says. It had no depth of earth. The earth was shallow. And so if your commitment to a truth claim is shallow, it has no depth, that usually translates into what I call the honeymoon phase.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody presents some idea and it sounds exciting, and so you decide to go just full bore into this idea, which is great. It's nice to be motivated like that. And we've all experienced that to some point. But if you're not prepared, if you're not wary of the natural pattern that follows in this stage, you'll most likely fall victim to the collapse of that thrill, the
Mm-hmm.
loss of it.
Well, we might think that that collapse, those bad, burnt out feelings, are possibly the evidence that the truth that we're experimenting on is a falsehood.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So then we give it up early. But the honeymoon phase is always going to be there. We need to remember that.
Exactly. Yes. So that's one form of neglect. And then the other is the seed that fell among thorns that grow up along with the thorns, and the thorns choke it, and therefore it yields no fruit. These are they which hear the word, and the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lusts of other things entering in, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. So this form of neglect is where typically you've been living a principle for years and become complacent and lazy or distracted and cease to live and act according to the belief. And then this really can happen at any stage.
Right? I think we can get distracted and we don't even know that our attention is being taken away from these truths. But we can also actively choose our comforts and our riches and those things over the truths.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a distraction. It's that, I actually don't want to live that way because I enjoy too much my lifestyle this way.
Yeah.
I enjoy too much my riches
Yeah, for sure. And so in a secular sense, I think an obvious example would be caring for one's own health.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how it doesn't matter how good a shape you're in right now. If you stop paying attention to the way you eat and your exercise and the amount of sleep you get, eventually it will catch up to you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really store up health and fitness for it to last really any length of time without attention and care being paid. Neglect can creep in at any point. That principle proves true in every sector of life. In your relationships, your education, your intellectual life, in your faith, and in your health.
Right.
So those are the three interrupters. Maybe let's go over the questions.
Yeah.
Have I ever experienced those first confirming signs, a swelling or enlightening of the soul? Can you think of an instance in your life where you remember feeling that?
Well, when we first started having kids and I was just really reading some books on parenting and, just how to discipline and care for kids, and something that I read was Peaceful Parent, Happy Child. And it was all about connecting with your kids. And if there is some kind of behavior problem in your child or they're acting out, it's probably, you can trace it back to a disconnection with you and them. And so it's all about working on yourself, working on being more patient and spending time loving that child and playing with that child and making sure that connection is strong. And then you have less behavior problems. And I took that and I believed it and I acted on it, and it worked. It felt good. It felt right. And I saw evidence that it was a truth. And so now I apply that. If I see one of my kids acting out, I always think, okay, one of us will take them on a date, or I'll be like, okay, I need to sit down and really connect with that child. And it puts the ball in my court, I guess. It gives me something to do and something to work on.
Yeah.
And it's been beneficial.
Yeah, and it was kind of, just like you said, a lot of these scenarios, I feel like probably more often than not, it's just a kind of a subtle aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
Something just rings true,
Yes.
It might be a big shocker sometimes, but often it's just kind of like this, even just a reminder of something you've forgotten or
Yeah.
neglected for a little while, right?
Mhm.
And it kind of just brings to your awareness a sector of your tree that could use some attention.
I like that. That's a good way to describe this swelling
Mm-hmm.
or enlightening feeling. It may feel like an aha moment or it just rings true. Like it just feels good. It feels right. It's a fruit of the spirit. Like it's a very joyful,
Mm-hmm.
humbling feeling. Like you're a part of something greater.
Yeah. I think it's really wonder,
Yeah,
which
that's
is something we'll talk about in chapter 12, but I think it's very closely related to wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, so I'm excited about next time. So the next chapter, we're going to wrap up this first half of the book talking about the experiment upon the word. And so what I would like to do next time is actually kind of go through the process. Maybe walk through, a specific truth claim that we're working on right now or that we've worked on in the past.
Okay.
I think it would be kind of cool to sort of demonstrate it and go through those questions to identify whether a word is good and stuff like that. And just kind of go over what we're currently doing to work through a certain idea that we've encountered.
Okay.
I think it would be kind of cool.
That would be cool.
Okay. Thanks again, Allie, for joining me.
Yes. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it. Additional resources can be found on my website at ryantclawson.com. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comments section and we will address them in a future episode. Also, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to this podcast. That makes us easier to find. Finally, I wish you peace and success, and I hope you can join me next week.